In 1907, Canadian police arrested a chief of the Sandy Lake Cree. The charge was murder. He admitted it. He said the woman he killed was becoming something else. That she was starving, even after she had eaten. That she had begun to look at the people around her in a way no human should. He killed her to stop what she was turning into. The court did not know what to do with this, because this was not superstition to him. It was procedure. His people had done this before. They had a word for what she was becoming: Wendigo. And this is not a story about a monster in the woods. It's a story about what happens to a person when the food runs out. Northern Canada in the 18th and 19th century was one of the hardest places on Earth to survive. Not because of predators, not because of war, because of winter. Winter up there lasts 8 months. Temperatures drop to 40 below. Snow buries everything. And when it comes, you are alone. No roads, no supply lines, no way out until spring. Small communities of Cree and Ojibwe peoples lived in these forests for thousands of years. They knew how to survive. They hunted caribou and moose, trapped beaver and rabbit, smoked meat and fish for the cold months. But some winters, the caribou didn't come. The traps stayed empty. The fish stopped running. And the food ran out. Not for a day. Not for a week. For months. Imagine that. You're in a shelter made of wood and hide. Your family is with you. The snow is 5 feet deep outside. Spring is 3 months away. And there is nothing left to eat. Nothing. Your children are crying. Your body is consuming itself. You can feel your mind changing. And somewhere in that darkness, a thought enters your head that you cannot push away. The Algonquian peoples had seen this before. They knew what happened next, and they had a name for it. We need to talk about something uncomfortable. Starvation cannibalism is real. It has happened everywhere humans have lived, in every century, on every continent. When people are trapped without food long enough, some of them cross the line. In northern Canada, this was not a distant possibility. It was a recurring event. There are documented cases. Hudson's Bay Company records from the 17 and 1800s describe families found in isolated camps after the winter ended. Some had died. Some had survived. And in some of those camps, the bodies of the dead showed evidence of what the survivors had done. Here's the part that matters. The people who survived this way were not evil. They were ordinary. They were mothers, fathers, hunters who had provided for their families their whole lives. They were people who did everything right and still ran out of food. The line between a normal person and someone who eats another human being is not character. It's about 80 days without food. But something happened after. The survivors who came back to their communities were changed. Not just traumatized. Different. Some couldn't eat normally again. Some described a hunger that never went away, no matter how much they ate. Some became violent. Some had to be watched. And the communities noticed a pattern. The ones who had eaten human flesh did not simply return to normal life. Something in them had opened, and it would not close. So the Algonquian peoples built a framework to explain what they were seeing. They said that when a person ate human flesh, something entered them. A spirit, a force, called Wendigo. And once it was inside, that person began to change. The descriptions are consistent across different nations, across hundreds of miles. The person becomes gaunt. No matter how much they eat, their body wastes away. Their skin turns gray, stretched tight over their bones. Their eyes sink into their skull. Their lips crack and pull back from their teeth. Some accounts say they chew their own lips off, and they grow. This part is important. The Wendigo becomes taller with every person it consumes, which means it can never be satisfied. Because as it eats, it gets bigger, and a bigger body needs more food. The hunger scales with the consumption forever. That is the horror at the center of this legend. Not a creature with teeth. A hunger that grows faster than you can feed it. The Algonquian understanding was not really about a monster. It was a warning. About greed. About taking more than you need. About what happens to a person who puts their own survival above everyone else. In a culture where sharing food was survival, where every person depended on the group, the worst thing a human could become was someone who consumed others and could not stop. They were not describing a beast in the forest. They were describing a person who had eaten their community and was still hungry. Now, here is where this stops being folklore. Because in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Canadian legal system started prosecuting Wendigo killings. These are court records, real trials, real sentences. The most documented case involves a man named Jack Fiddler. He was a chief and a healer of the Sucker clan of the Sandy Lake Cree in what is now northern Ontario. Among his people, he had a specific responsibility. When someone began showing signs of becoming Wendigo, it was his duty to stop it. By 1907, he was said to have killed 14 people. Not in anger, not for gain. As a duty. In 1907, the Northwest Mounted Police arrested Jack Fiddler and his brother Joseph. They were charged with the murder of a woman who Fiddler said was becoming Wendigo. And here is where two completely different worlds collided. To the Canadian court, this was simple homicide. A man killed a woman. He admitted it. Case closed. But to Fiddler and his community, he had performed a necessary act. They believed that if he had not killed her, she would have turned and killed everyone in the camp. He was not a murderer to them. He was the person who protected them. Jack Fiddler never went to trial. While in custody, he escaped and took his own life in the forest. His brother Joseph was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. A pardon was eventually granted. It arrived 3 days after he died in prison. Now, think carefully about what these trials reveal. They do not prove that Wendigo existed, but they prove something else. That entire communities genuinely believed that a person could become one, that they believed it so completely. They were willing to kill people they loved to stop it. That is not a story told around a fire. That is a belief system that people acted on with lethal seriousness. The last documented Wendigo killing happened in the 1950s. After that, the story moved out of the forests and into books, films, video games. But the Algonquian understanding was never about a monster in the woods. It was always about people. Think about the definition again. Wendigo is a hunger that grows with consumption. The more it takes, the bigger it gets. The bigger it gets, the more it needs. There is no satisfaction. There is no enough. Where have we seen this pattern? In addiction, the dose that must keep growing, just to feel normal. In wealth, the person who has more than they can spend and still cannot stop. In a world that must always grow, because standing still means dying. The Algonquian peoples were not describing a fantasy. They were describing a spiritual disease that affects human beings under specific conditions. And when you look at the world we have built, those conditions are everywhere. The monster is not in the northern forests anymore. It's in the way we live. That is why this legend refuses to die. Not because we still fear cannibals in the woods, but because we recognize the pattern. We know what it feels like to feed a hunger that keeps growing. to want more than we need, to become something we cannot stop. The Wendigo was never a monster from outside. It was always a warning about what we become when there is never enough.